Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today is Crime Time Thursday. This will probably go up late because I was trying to get everything situated and get things done, and I had to go to Harrisonville yesterday. Slowed me down. Anyways, today I'm going to do something a little different. I am going to go way back into the beginning of the 1900s on more of a personal case. And it's kind of a where did they go? What happened to a family? Not that something happened to them, just that they seem to have basically disappeared at one point. And I am talking about Inez O'Brien Deyoe. Okay? I'm going to pause just a second. I wanted to get the right pages in front of me before I got any farther. My family history goes all the way back to the good ship Anne that came over in 1623 from England, from Dorsetshire. So it's a long history. We've been here since pretty much the beginning of colonization of the Americas. So we've been here a long time. I didn't get into looking up our genealogy until riding around Missouri. I found a town called Sprague, and I was like, what? There's a town called Sprague? This is really interesting. It also used to have a college. Now, there's not much left to this town, but a few buildings, a few homes. The college is pretty much gone. There's not, it's almost a ghost town. There's that little bit left, okay? But I do have people are outside on my patio. Are you kidding me? At 6:15 in the morning. Rude. Anyhow, back to what I was saying. So this town is pretty much non-existent. It piqued my curiosity because I grew up with all kinds of stories about my grandfather and his family. I was always told that my great-grandfather and his wife, I never knew their names other than their last name was Sprague. They took off and went west and left behind a bunch of kids, a lot of kids, and they farmed them out to different places, took a couple of the oldest kids and a baby or two, but left all the middle-aged kids with other family members, scattered them about with other people and stuff that would take them. That's what I was always grown up to heard. The number of kids left and how many went varied from one time to the next. It kind of always like piqued my curiosity as to whatever happened to these people. Where did they go? And then I'm out here in the Midwest, and here is this town called Sprague. I started digging. I typed in when I found out what my great-grandfather's name was, eventually I was like shocked because I found some information. And all I did was I Googled my grandfather's name, who I've never known. My parents did not have any connection with my grandfather. My grandmother and my grandfather were divorced when my dad and his brother were little. My dad pretty much was the homekeeper. He kept the house. He cooked for my brother, or his brother, and he did things while my grandmother worked her little fingers off and, you know, raised them as a single mom until she became involved with and married Otis Hughes. And then she still worked because she felt she had to provide for her boys still. She was a very uprighteous person. My grandmother was just a sweet lady. And her name, by the way, is Laura. So if you hear me talk about Laura Sprague, I'm talking about my grandmother in here. Anyway, so I Googled Wiled, Sprague. And I found him. And I found a thing called the Sprague Project. My whole family's history is now laid out in front of me, all the way back to the good ship Anne, where they came over. And I was like blown. I also found my great-grandfather and his wife. Frank Deyoe is his name. I remember my dad telling me when he tried to get on disability, and because he had really bad health problems, and he had kidney failure and all kinds of stuff going on, it was terrible. I would not wish the way my father passed for anybody to ever pass. Red flags flew up because back then, when people take in someone's child, usually there's a name change or something that goes on. But in this case, there was no name change. My grandfather, Wiled Sprague, just started using the name Sprague. There was no name change, took place, nothing. So even though my grandfather, Wiled, married my grandmother, Laura, and she used the Sprague name, it was incorrect. He married her as a Sprague, but he's actually still a Deyoe. So we have that going on, and that raised a flag when my dad tried to apply for disability. Come to find out, we're actually all supposed to be Deyoe. That kind of threw a monkey wrench into it, so there's all that going on. And that's when we realized things aren't all that they seem to be. Hiram Sprague took in my grandfather when he was just a toddler. Why? We all were told because they went west. Okay. Hiram Sprague would have been my great-grandfather's uncle. The family tree is very difficult to follow because this family member over here, which would have been like a cousin, would have married this family member over here, which wasn't really a family member. It would have been like this family member's cousin from another family member. They crisscross, but they're not actually related. It's because this side of this husband's family marries this side of this wife's family, and they all crisscross and intertwine, and it's a very difficult to follow. They've done a pretty good job at making the family tree as understandable as possible, but that's how families worked way back in the day. We're talking back in the early 1900s, okay? So Hiram and Jesse Sprague takes in Frank Deyoe. Even when Hiram passes away, he's listed as his nephew. Because we even have the census records, he's listed as his nephew that's living with him, nephew that he's raising. There's newspaper articles that list that working with his nephew. Only in a couple instances they list him as his son, but list him as Frank Deyoe. So all through his life, they consider him his nephew. Even in his will, it's called his nephew that he raised. So Frank Deyoe, my great-great-grandfather, the one that passed away, his son that was taken and raised by Hiram, which is Wiled, is constantly considered as his nephew, not his son. So I have pictures of Wiled, and I'll probably try to get them up in here if I can, because they're on this phone, and I'll try to transfer them. And I'll probably try to stick a few pictures in this if I can. Depends on how long this takes me. In this picture, you'll see the man, Hiram Sprague, standing next to my grandfather, Wiled Deyoe Sprague. And the next photo that was sent to me by my uncle, he said that this is Hiram standing next to my grandfather, Wiled. Now, I don't find this very truthful because if you look at this man that he said is Hiram and compare it to the picture here, this is Wiled and my grandmother, Laura. They've been married sometimes. Take a look at him. That is the man in the other picture making the young boy. Actually, my dad. Here is another picture. This tall drink of a woman on the right is actually Ethel. Now, Ethel has her own story. Ethel is somehow another child that Hiram Sprague has taken in at some point in time with his first wife. Standing next to Ethel is Wiled, and then the little boy there that my uncle's pointing to, that is my father standing there. And the guy next to my father is Hiram Sprague himself. And this is at the Sprague homestead at Lou Beach. So there's a lot of things going on there. I do not have pictures of Frank or Inez. I wish I did. I don't. This whole thing kind of got me into thinking, and I was going through this, and I was trying to get a hold of my uncle because at this point, most of my family's passed away, and my mother has, at this point, had dementia, and she's recently passed in 2019. So I have no one to ask. Everybody else is deceased. And I'm doing this alone. And I like to follow things like the Salem witch trials and things like that. It's always drawn me in. I go to this thing, and it's not only about the Salem witch trials, it also talks about genealogy in our Bates County Museum. I go to it, I walk in, and the guy that I have no clue who he is, took one look at me, he says, "You're a Sprague, aren't you?" And I'm like, I literally step back, and I'm like, "Who are you, and how do you know me?" He goes, "I have some really good information for you. You're going to want to sit throughout this whole thing. Are you here for the genealogy or for the Salem witch trials?" And I said, "Well, I'm interested in the Salem witch trials, but I need help trying to figure out my genealogy." He says, "Oh boy, are we ever going to help you out with both." Come to find out, boy, did he ever. My biggest thing is, I tried to get my uncle to help me with the genealogy. And I asked him, I said, "I'm looking through all this. I want to know what happened to Frank's wife, Inez." Inez O'Brien Deyoe disappears off the face of the earth along with her, the first two children. I find out this whole story of them having many children, farming out a bunch of them, was false. They have 3 children total. Now, they don't list in the genealogy, they don't even list Wiled as their child, even though he is. He's listed under Hiram as being the child, but nephew, but child of. That's where it gets confusing. But he is Frank and Inez's son. So it gets confusing, okay? But they have 2 other children, Lydia and Edwin Deyoe. Now, I will tell you that Inez, also who is called Ina, so it's hard to follow their census records, because way back then, census records were just scribbled out, written down. Letters are not clear, so the census records are hard to read from back then. So she was only, I believe, 12 years old when they were married. which back then was common. They had Lydia in 1904 and then had Edwin in 1908. And let me step back to when Wiled was born. Wiley, or Wiled, they called him both all throughout this. He was born in 1911. So they were married quite a while. There's a good age gap between all three children. And he lived in Shin Creek, but that's not where he passed away at. I did find that he has another whole family. And there's a thing that comes up about that way down the road as to why my father quit speaking to him. Very sad story. So we're back to their children. They were married in, she was born in 1887, and her first child was born in 1904, 87, 1904. They were married in, hold on, I gotta find everything. From the U.S. Census, okay, which is what they go by. And in the U.S. Census, and I was trying to figure this all out, they were married, and she is his wife. She was born in February 1887. She was 13 years old, and this is the 1900 U.S. Census, and they had just been married with no children, and this was in 1900. The children were born in 1904, 1908, and then the next U.S. Census in which was 20 years later, because back then the censuses were 20 years, it would have shown Wiled being born. So she was at that time 13. So she was just 13 years old when they got married. She would have been 17 when they had, about 16 or 17 when they had their first child. So when you're looking at these, remember to go back and compare what is put here and compare the census, because you want to go and look at the census records. Because I got to tell you, family don't like to have dirt dug up. They really don't. And then people putting in information like married in 1909, that's probably a typo, because the 1900 is that census is the one you want to look at, because they were already married in the census, or maybe they were just living together at that point. I don't know what happened, but either way, they had the first two children, Lydia and Edwin, and then they had my grandfather, Wiled. Wiled was given over to Jesse and Hiram Sprague to be raised. But what happened to Inez? Well, I did find out after reading about Frank Deyoe. This is his obituary from the Beaverkill Valley. And this is, I'm not sure what page in 232 it's going to be, there's talking about, but this is what was written. Frank M. Deyoe at his home in Harding, New York, Hardenburg, New York, Wednesday, November 24th, 1915. So that would make my grandfather about 4 years old when Frank died. Occurred the death of Frank M. Deyoe after an illness of some time of the heart and stomach trouble. Mr. Deyoe was the son of Mr. and Mrs. E. D. Deyoe of Lou Beach and was 36 years of age. He is survived by his wife and 3 children, father, mother, and 1 brother. Funeral services were held Sunday at 1 o'clock Reverend Gardner of Rockland officiating, and burial was made in Lou Beach Cemetery. Guess what I'm going to do if I ever make it back to New York? I'm going to go look for Frank's grave. I'm going to go look, see if Inez is buried nearby. She could be, she may not be, I don't know. But it'd be nice to know. Because after this, there is no record of Inez. It does not show any other children. It does not show when she had died. It says that there's some notes from 2006, 2007, but these are all notes where people put information in. As we could tell, the dates on here are incorrect, but you make sure you look at the census dates because those are going to be more accurate than people putting in information. There's even a map that shows, that pinpoints things. This is very well put together. They claim that both Lydia and Edwin are both deceased, but they say date unknown. But, born in 1904 and 1908, they're going to be past. I know my grandfather's passed away like years and years ago. And so we're left with just nothing. Once, and of course it says Inez has passed away. When it comes to Lydia's sheet, all it says is her name. She was born about 1904. Her parents are Frank and Inez, or Ina as they called her. And that's it. That she lived in Hardenburg. And the last thing that they have on her was, that's it. When Frank passed, that was the last thing that they have on her. Edwin, the other brother, the last thing they have on him was the same. The date that Frank passed was the last they have on her. So basically, Inez and the two older children fell off the face of the earth once Frank, my great-grandfather, passes away. Inez O'Brien Deyoe and her two oldest children, Lydia Deyoe and Edwin, Lydia A. Deyoe and Edwin C. Deyoe, born in 1904 and 1908, are gone. They disappeared off the face of the earth according to the Sprague Project. Now, the story about asking my uncle about information, this is the part that's going to make everyone laugh. I asked my uncle about this because I wanted to know what happened. What happened with Inez? Where did, what happened to the rest of the family? I've gotten this far. What happened? Do you have any other information? His words to me were, leave it alone. Don't bother with it. You don't need that. She bewitched your great-grandfather. She was a witch. Leave it alone. She bewitched him and she killed him. I wasn't going to take that. I'm like, really? Okay, Uncle. Are you off your crazy meds? Okay. So that's why I went to this thing to look up genealogy. When I found out what I did about my family history, and it sent me to all of this, and guys, I didn't print it all. First of all, I don't think everything I needed to print would have fit in this binder. I skipped a lot. I quit at one point. I quit and jumped to, well, I didn't even print that. I jumped to Phineas Sprague. I don't know if you can see that. Phineas Sprague is my ancestor that came over from England. And he is one of them that came over on the good ship Ian. Okay. One of the originals. Phineas Sprague. Are you ready? I don't know if I can get down there. His daughter is none other than, oop, I poked the wrong one. I don't know if you can see that. His daughter is none other than Martha Sprague from the Salem witch trials. Now, there is some pertinent family information. I see that they removed the correspondence because let me see. I don't know if they're going to let me see this. There was a correspondent that come in here that had, yeah, see, they removed it. I should have printed it. I should have printed it. It was information regarding Martha Sprague Tyler. And this correspondence was actually from a family member who had inside information about the Salem witch trials dealing with Martha and what all went down that was kept private along the family that he was going to share. So it wasn't Inez that was involved in any sort of witchcraft or anything like that. Actually, it's the Sprague family that is connected with the Salem witch trials, not Inez. So there you have it, guys. I wish I could find a family of Lydia A. Deyoe, born in 1904, or Edwin C. Deyoe, born in 1908. I did, have at one point contact with my grandfather's other family. He ended up raising a little girl that she thought he was her father until she became an adult, and it was close to his passing when she found out he was actually just raising her. And the meeting with when my dad, and I'm going to tell this story really quick because I'm getting close. My dad, mom had their first son, my oldest brother, Willie. And they were very proud of their son, and they were taking him to meet my dad's dad, Wiled. And she had sent me some pictures, and one of the pictures was dated shortly before the time when my dad and mom would have taken my oldest brother to meet them. And I can remember my mom and dad telling about this story of going there, and that my dad was done. He was done. He wanted nothing more to do with it. The picture is of my grandfather holding these new children. One of them was a boy and the other one was a little girl. The little girl, I believe, would have been the young woman that I was in contact with at that time, that he raised as a daughter. This is the photo that was sent to me. This is my actual grandfather, Wiled, and these two children. And this photo was taken about the same time that my parents were taking my oldest brother to meet him for the first time. Can you imagine? This man threw away my father and his brother, wanted nothing to do with them for many years. And my dad managed to get back in contact with him and was trying to have a relationship with him. And then here he is, all proud being a dad with a new family. My dad comes up to introduce him to his first son. And I imagine how that felt like a slap in the face to my dad. And I get it. I get it. So anyways, there's that mystery. So if in the YouTube world, someone out there maybe knows or has a grandparent who is Edwin C. Deyoe or Lydia A. Deyoe, reach out to me. I would like to know what became of my great-grandmother and how their life went. What happened? Because I gotta tell you, the Sprague family has a lot of dark history involved in them. A lot of dark history. And a lot of huge untruths and a lot of things that really bother me. So everybody, thank you for following along. I kind of put this together without having notes. I'm sorry if I rambled, but everyone have a most wonderful day and take care. Bye, guys.